We're here at the IAS meeting in Vancouver with Ian McGowan, who's of the University of Pittsburgh and a professor there. We are appreciative of you taking the time, and the focus for you would be rectal microbicides and so forth, and we're trying to really address that from a more broad perspective because it is an important subject, and it is a piece of the armamentarium for prevention. So the piece that you bring to the conference is, again,
So, well, just to begin at the beginning, I guess, and it's always a pleasure to be here. I think, the whole microbicide field is evolving within a broader sort of spectrum. There's a lot happening in the PrEP field and the prevention field, which is very exciting. We're seeing great data on oral PrEP. We're beginning to see safety data on injectables. I think people are really looking at what strategies are needed. And, the Microbicide Trial Network, where, I work, we always think, you need a toolbox. Different people will want different products. And I think if people take oral PrEP, it's going to work. It's a great innovation in the field, but some people may not want to, and they may prefer other alternatives. So, at MTN, we will be looking forward to unblinding our first phase 3 study of a vaginal ring, which is a new innovation for topical HIV prevention for women. But also we continue, as you said, to work in the area of rectal microbicides. So at this meeting, we have a poster which is describing the baseline characteristics of the population we've enrolled into our first phase 2 rectal microbicide study. That's pretty interesting because the study enrolled just under 200 men who have sex with men and transgender women in the United States, but also in Thailand, in Peru, and in South Africa. So it really, I think, has established the feasibility of doing this type of research in the relevant populations. The study's completed, we're in analysis, and hopefully we'll be presenting those data next year.
So I know it's been mentioned several times in the press conferences, enrolling transgender. Is this a challenge because there's usually not enough to really answer a question more specifically for that population?
I think we need to be as inclusive as we possibly can. And so, the MTN's always been interested in marginal populations, by which I mean pregnant women, adolescents, men who have sex with men, and transgender populations. So, often when people think about rectal microbicides, they say, hey, well, that's something for gay guys, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
And the reality, it is, and we really hope they'll use them if they're ready. But we also want anyone who's at risk of HIV for anal sex. So that's going to include women, and it's going to include transgender populations. And so naturally, we enroll those in our studies. Right. And again, not many people know that.
As much of the real world as possible into this.
Absolutely. And in most of the phase 1 rectal microbicide studies I've been involved with, or colleagues, we tend to enroll about 30% of the population is women. And it's not just women, it's women who have a history that are prepared to show that they have anal sex.
How do you manage to bring that to happen? Because I know that a lot of pharmaceutical companies have always struggled to bring the women above 15% or so.
I don't know. I think it's fascinating. Different cities, different populations. I work in Pittsburgh.
Do you put a hold on the male population?
No, not really. We just, it just turns out that we usually end up enrolling about a third. Now, some studies, I will say, we really want to enroll women in a sort of controlled way. So, for instance, we're doing a study of Maraviroc, oral, rectal, and vaginal. Well, you need a vagina to be in that study. So, in fact, it's a phase 1 study. It's not a big study. It's about 20 people, but 10 have to be women, 10 have to be men. So we can do it in that way. But I think coming back to the transgender issue, I think MTN is very proud of the fact that we, I think in the phase 2 study, we enrolled about 10% transgender population. No other network has come close to that.
Imagine, yeah.
Now, it was 200 people, so that amounts to about 15 to 20 people. Yeah. The majority were in Thailand, but equally there were the transgender populations recruited in Peru and in the US.
Great. Any other things that you have found at the conference that are jumping out at you as exciting or important, especially?
Well, I think, there's always so much to absorb in these conferences. I've been very intrigued by some of the very large studies that are being talked about, particularly the possibility of a phase 3 cabotegravir long-acting injection study. And I think the unique issue there is the design, I think, is fascinating because we live in a world now where we have unequivocal data that oral PrEP is safe and highly effective. So traditionally, to pair that in a comparative design with an injectable, which may not be as well studied, particularly in terms of effectiveness, is a little unusual. But that's what they're going to do. It's going to be a challenging study, but very important study. And then I think, you may have others talking about this, but again, I think the concept of a broadly neutralizing antibody effectiveness study as a means to define a sort of a protective level of neutralizing antibodies is a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I think so. I'm hopeful that we have more of this integration of the different types of approaches. And I always look at that, and everyone says, well, you have to just define the answer to this separately first. And then, especially when you're going to the cure, you have to see what are we getting individually, and then we can put things together. But I think in the case of prevention, it's really, like you said, what people are going to be doing. That's what's going to work.
Absolutely.
They want to make the choices.
I mean, if people don't want to use a formulation, a strategy, a product, then that's not going to be good for them.
And they may make choices that change.
Yeah, I mean, again, we know, and this has been mentioned in the conference, I think, oral PrEP in women, to some extent, the jury is still out. And I'm sure in the partners prevention study, serodiscordant couples, they did demonstrate efficacy in women, but none of the other studies have, and they've been studies enrolling the real at-risk population, which is young women in sub-Saharan Africa. And that's why we hope things like the ring study we're doing, the vaginal ring study, maybe a product they will really embrace and use. People don't use it, it won't work. So we're excited about that. Yeah.
Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time with me, and for our audience, we always appreciate the opportunity to talk about, especially rectal microbicides, which, as I said before, it isn't discussed a lot at the conference, and it really needs to be because it's a broad issue. Yeah, a lot of people.
Well, hopefully we may, touch wood, have some great news to share at CROI, and perhaps we can continue the conversation
I was
then.
going to say, your invitation is out. we expect you there now, and so we will see you there in Boston in February.
Great.
A nice chilly time of year.
Indeed. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Take
Ian.
care.
Yeah.